Welcome back to the channel. I've been a little bit busy, so I've kind of been doing some stuff without filming it. I got the engine and transmission out of my 93 Dodge to be swapped over into this red 96. So there's a little bit of work we have to do before we can put everything in. I got new poly bushings for the engine mounts for the second gen Dodge. I got a new oil pan I need to swap over and crossover tube. We also got the bung welded in for the turbo drain. And then on the engine here as well, I have to change out the valve seals as they're starting to come up or come off. So I got some top hat style ones, so the valve spring will actually sit on top of these right here and help hold them down. So we got to go through and take the top end of the engine apart, pull the injectors and change all those out. So I was going to do kind of my best to film the whole process. So yeah, just follow along. Okay, so as you can see, let me just focus in on the camera here. So you see how that rubber seal is coming apart on the one exhaust valve on number 6 cylinder. I think I spotted another one too. I think number number 5 as well. I think there was something going on there too. Anyways, so what we got to do is I'm gonna bar the engine over and find TDC number 1, and I'm just gonna go through and do each cylinder individually on its in the firing order. So to bar the engine over, I got a turning tool in, and then a long extension and a 1/2 inch ratchet. To find TDC number 1, so you can, there's that right there which will pin your cam. So that's a timing pin for this engine, and so when you push that into the back of the camshaft, it'll line up, it'll go into a hole, and that'll lock you onto TDC number 1. And then every third of a crankshaft revolution will be your next TDC for your firing order. So 2 full revolutions of the crankshaft to go through your firing order. So anyway, so I'm gonna get the engine locked onto TDC number 1, and then what we'll do next is we will have to undo the lash on the rockers, and then pull the rockers, pull the bridge. I'm gonna have to pull all the injectors and injector lines, and then we can use so this tool, where did I put the tool? I got the tool here somewhere. So yeah, so then I have this tool here, a valve spring compressor tool, that'll allow me to, so this bolts on top of where the injectors go, and then you can thread this down and compress all your valves and then release all the keepers, and then we'll pull the valve springs and retainers, and then pop the old seals off, and we'll install the new seals. Okay, so now that we have the engine onto TDC, what I like to do is a little cheater trick, is I just take a paint marker and I mark my TDC where it pins, just for future reference to make it easier to find. I also have it marked on a blue paint pen from underneath, so that when you're underneath the truck you can do it from underneath. And then I split it up into 3 equally sections, so that when I go through my firing order, I know where the next TDC is going to be roughly. So now that we're on TDC number 1, both intake and exhaust are loose, so you can see how they can move up and down. And then if you go to number 6, which is the running mate to number 1, both of them are tight, so they're on valve overlap. So now what we want to do is, before you ever take off your rockers, it's always a good idea to undo the adjusters to relieve the tension on the valve system. Okay, because we're gonna have to reset these anyways. So now those are really sloppy. So now if we grab a 10 mil, so if we grab a 10 mil, there. So now pull these off as an assembly, like so. And then I usually just put them in the valve cover, so I know that that's number 1. And then my bridges, it's important to look at the way that they came off. Some of them it doesn't matter, but these ones have indicating little dots on them that are meant to go out to the outside. So you make sure the intake one stays with the intake one, and the exhaust one stays with the exhaust. Okay. So now that that's done, I gotta get the injector lines off and pull out the cross tubes, and then I can unbolt the injector and pull the injector out. Okay, so we got the crossover tube undone. The injector line is undone on both the pump and the into the head, and it just kind of moves out of the way enough to get access to it, to the crossover tube. So now we're gonna undo the injector here, hold down, so like so. Okay, so that's the injector hold down. There. Okay, so now I believe so now I just got a injector remover tool. So you thread the bolt in, and then as you tighten the nut, it should start to lift the injector. Just like so. So there we go, injectors are out. These are DAP 7x11s. So now we take our tool and it fits in just like so. Then we put our hardware in and tighten that down. Those 10 mil. It's 11. Right there. Yeah, so we want to make sure those are tight. Okay, those are getting snug. Now you want to lubricate the threads on the tool here. I'm just going to use the engine oil that's here right now. Okay. So now if we take this, so now you want to set this on there, and we want to line it up so that all of our keepers will come through the hole there. Okay. So now we just tighten this down. Alrighty, so now you just tighten this down, and as that tightens down, the valve springs will start to collapse, and then it'll free up the keepers. As you can see, they're coming loose. And then you just take a pick and a magnet and you scoop them all out. Get yourself a little container, cup, or magnetic tray to put them all in, because you don't want to lose any of them. And then, yeah, that's all there is to getting rid of the keepers here. Alrighty. Okay, so now that I got the springs all the way collapsed and all the retainers, or the retainers removed, now we want to undo the nut. Should have grabbed a socket and my ratchet, but okay, so now we can remove our tool. Okay, perfect. So now our valve springs can be removed. Exhaust. Intake. And now, see how some of these are coming apart. Now I'll just grab a pair of pliers and pull those off, and we can install the new ones. So the yellow ones are intake, and the bluish green ones are exhaust. And then you just take a socket and that fits over them, and you just lightly tap them down with a dead blow hammer. We can put our valves back into place, or exhausts where they were, our intakes where they were. Make sure everything's good and centered. Then we can put our tool back on. With the tool, it is labeled which side is which. So you put that back on and center it as best as possible. And then you can put your nut on. And then slowly crank this down and make sure everything is lining up and coming through correctly, because you don't want any binding or... So then you just crank that down. Crank it down until... Oh. So yeah, I'll get this cranked down. Alrighty, so once we get it cranked down, we want to take our little keepers and be very careful with them. I'm just going to show installing one, just because I don't want to drop any. So this little focus, so the little locking groove there, as you can see, they're tapered. So the locking groove will fit in that groove right there, and then as the valve comes up on the taper, they'll get tight. So you just want to set them in so that they're in the groove, and are going to come up and start into the retaining of the valve. And just come up really slow when you're doing it. I'm gonna stop filming just for a few minutes, just because it's want to use two hands. Got the keepers installed. Inspect to make sure that they are indeed locked into place, because you don't want to drop a valve. They all look good to me, so those are that's ready to go back to work. So now we can remove our pedestal for a tool and reinstall the injector, and then we'll go to reinstall the rocker arms and latching the valves. Alrighty, so we're reinstalling the injector. Lubricate the O-ring. That's your fuel inlet port, so that's going to go towards our crossover tube. So you want to line up the injector, give it a good push, and then you want to find the hold down, which I don't remember what I did with it. Oh, it's over by the valve cover. So find the hold down right there. So this will help line up the injector. There you can get the one bolt started. So there we go. There we go. Sure we're seated. Like so. So now we can take over some of our tools. Take our crossover tube here, and we can. I don't have to pull it right out. So take our crossover tube, and we'll remove our tool. Okay, crossover tube's ready to go back in. Some of the common rails, they actually have like alignment dowels. This one doesn't really have anything to line up with, so And it should okay. It should snap in kind of. And then we can put on our alrighty. So just gotta monkey around with getting everything all lined back up again. So there, it should snap in like that. Then we can line up our ejector line and just snug it by hand. Make sure this one's lined up like so and so. And so now we can, I'll have to look up the torque spec, but we can torque this injector to spec and then tighten up those injector lines. We will have to bleed the fuel system when I go to start this thing, but for now I'll just tighten everything up. Okay, so I got the rockers bolted back on, torqued the bolts to 20 foot-pounds. Make sure that the push rods are lined up with your adjusters here. So now we're going to set the valves on cylinder number 1. So I set the intake on this engine to 8 thou, and then the exhaust lash to 18 thou. So to set the valve lash, you take I have just a wrench with a 9/16 socket welded onto the end of it. But so this will be for your jam nut, and then where's my? Is this my 5mm? Let's just check. So yeah, so you just take this and you will thread this nut down, or this adjusting screw down, until you feel it start to get tight. And then you're looking for, so right there, I can't even pull the feeler gauge out, so then you want to just see that's too loose. So you're just trying to find it where it's got a slight drag on it, and then it's hard to do with one hand, but so it's got a slight drag on it. So about there, roughly. So right there, it's got a slight drag on it. It takes a little bit of force to get it out, but you can slide it in and out. Then you want to take your wrench, and you want to, so what you want to do is you want to tighten your jam nut while holding your position on your feeler gauge, or on your Allen head there, to keep the adjusting screw centered. And then just double check after you got it tight to make sure that it didn't change. Sometimes it takes a couple attempts to get it to be perfect. And then usually what I do too is, once I've gone through and adjusted all my valves, is I'll rotate the engine over by hand a couple of times, and then go through and check everything and make sure everything is good. Check all my settings again, and make sure I didn't mess something up, whether or not get the push rod seated correctly, or the bridge isn't in place correctly, or something silly, right? So you always want to double check when it comes to your rotating assembly of the engine. So I'm going to go through and get all the valves, these two valves, adjusted, and then go ahead and I'm just going to work my way through and get all the other seats or valve seals changed out, and I'll catch you back up on the next video. Thank you very much for watching.